3 weeks after the explosion that destroyed the criminal command center beneath the palace, Marcus stood in the rebuilt security briefing room, facing an audience that would have seemed impossible just a month earlier. Representatives from MI5, Scotland Yard, Interpol, and intelligence agencies from 6 European countries filled the chairs normally occupied by palace guards. The investigation into what media had dubbed the royal conspiracy had grown into the largest international security operation in decades. Director Hamilton stood at the front of the room, presenting findings that painted a picture of criminal ambition beyond anything the investigators had initially imagined. The attack on the British royal family had indeed been just one part of a coordinated assault on traditional government structures across Europe, funded by a coalition of international crime syndicates and rogue intelligence operatives. Captain Thornfield's discovery and subsequent actions prevented what intelligence analysts now believe would have been the most significant attack on democratic institutions since World War II. Hamilton announced to the assembled investigators. The evidence recovered from the palace facility, combined with arrests made in 6 other countries, has revealed a conspiracy with tentacles reaching into the highest levels of government and business across the continent. Marcus tried to maintain his professional composure, but the scope of what they had uncovered still left him struggling to process the implications. Dr. Hartwell, recovering in a secure medical facility while awaiting trial, had provided detailed information about the conspiracy in exchange for reduced charges. His revelations painted a picture of meticulous planning that had been underway for over a decade. The criminals had positioned operatives in royal households, government agencies, security services, and cultural institutions across Europe. Their ultimate goal wasn't just theft or even kidnapping, but the systematic dismantling of traditional authority structures to create a power vacuum that could be filled by their international sponsors. The Jerusalem collection that Captain Thornfield discovered in their planning documents was actually a code name for coordinated kidnapping operations targeting royal families and heads of state, Hamilton continued. The stolen artifacts were being used as currency in an underground economy that funded everything from political assassination to cyber warfare. Chief Inspector Reynolds, who had been cleared of any involvement in the conspiracy after extensive investigation, added his own assessment. What makes this case particularly disturbing is how the criminals exploited the trust and traditions that make institutions like the monarchy function. They turned our greatest strengths, loyalty, discretion, and personal relationships, into vulnerabilities. The briefing covered arrests and ongoing investigations in 12 countries, with criminal networks being dismantled from London to Prague to Athens. Morrison and most of his immediate collaborators had been captured during the MI5 response to the palace attack, though several key figures had managed to escape and were still being hunted by international law enforcement. But the victory came at a significant cost. The palace itself had suffered structural damage that would require months to repair completely. More seriously, the attack had shaken public confidence in the security of government institutions. Opinion polls showed declining trust in traditional authority figures, exactly the effect the conspiracy had been designed to achieve. Marcus found himself thrust into an uncomfortable spotlight as investigations, media attention, and official recognition transformed him from an anonymous guard into a public figure. The Queen herself had personally thanked him during a private ceremony, presenting him with a commendation for exceptional service to the crown. Prime Minister Watson had praised his actions in Parliament, describing him as an example of the courage and integrity that protect our democratic way of life. But Marcus struggled with the praise, knowing that his actions had been driven more by desperation than heroism. In quiet moments, he wondered whether there had been other ways to stop the conspiracy without risking so many lives. The explosion he had triggered could easily have killed innocent people, including members of the royal family he had been trying to protect. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the psychologist assigned to help palace staff deal with the trauma of the attack, had explained that such doubts were normal for anyone who had survived a life-threatening situation. "You made the best decision you could with the information available at the time," she assured him during their weekly sessions. "The fact that you're questioning yourself shows healthy moral reflection, not weakness." The sessions were helpful, but Marcus knew that his relationship with the palace had fundamentally changed. He could no longer walk the corridors with the comfortable familiarity he had enjoyed for 12 years. Every shadow could hide a threat. Every new staff member required scrutiny. Every system malfunction triggered memories of the conspiracy that had almost succeeded. 3 days after the briefing, Marcus received an unexpected summons to meet with the king privately in his study. The monarch looked older than before the attack, with lines of strain around his eyes that hadn't been there previously. But his manner remained as gracious and thoughtful as ever. "Captain Thornfield, please sit down. I wanted to speak with you away from the formal ceremonies and official recognition. What you did for my family, and for the institution we represent, goes beyond anything that can be adequately rewarded through normal channels." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. Any guard in my position would have acted similarly." The king smiled sadly. "I don't think that's true, Captain. The investigation revealed that several other guards had opportunities to discover the conspiracy, but failed to act on suspicious signs. You not only noticed what others missed, but you had the courage to pursue the truth even when it put you in mortal danger." "Sir, I made mistakes throughout the investigation. I acted independently when I should have followed protocol. I put others at risk with my decisions." "Yes, you did make mistakes. But you also saved lives and preserved institutions that millions of people depend on for stability and continuity. The question now is what you want to do with the rest of your career." Marcus looked up, surprised by the king's words. He had assumed that his future would involve continued service with the royal guard, probably with enhanced responsibilities reflecting his experience with the conspiracy. "I've been speaking with Director Hamilton and other security officials about the ongoing threat posed by the network you helped expose," the king continued. "They need people with your combination of loyalty, intelligence, and operational experience to help build defenses against future attacks. The conspiracy you uncovered was just one tentacle of something much larger and more dangerous." "What are you suggesting, Your Majesty?" "A new role, Captain. Something that would take you beyond the palace walls, but still serve the same fundamental mission of protecting the democratic institutions that define our way of life. The choice is entirely yours, of course. You've already given more than anyone could reasonably ask." Marcus considered the king's words carefully. The idea of leaving the palace, the only professional home he had known for 12 years, was both frightening and intriguing. But he also recognized that his discovery of the conspiracy had given him insights that could be valuable in protecting other institutions from similar attacks. "What kind of role, sir?" "International coordination of security for democratic governments and cultural institutions, working with allied nations to identify and neutralize threats before they can develop into what we experienced here. It would be dangerous work, probably involving extended travel and significant personal risk." Marcus thought about the stolen artifacts he had seen in the underground vault, representing thousands of years of human cultural achievement reduced to merchandise in a criminal economy. He thought about the families of the guards who had been compromised by the conspiracy, innocent people who had suffered because of their relatives' betrayal. Most of all, he thought about how close the criminals had come to succeeding in their plan to reshape European society according to their twisted vision. "Your Majesty, if this work could prevent other families from experiencing what we went through here, then I'm interested in learning more about it." The king nodded approvingly. "I hoped you would say that. Director Hamilton is preparing a briefing on current international threats and emerging conspiracies. What you'll learn will probably disturb you, but it will also demonstrate why the attack began at exactly 2 in the morning, with the precision of a military operation that had been rehearsed countless times." Marcus watched from his concealed position as Morrison's teams emerged from the underground facility and dispersed throughout the palace with practiced efficiency. They moved in coordinated groups, each team heading toward predetermined objectives with the confidence of people who knew exactly where they were going. Marcus counted at least 20 criminals, all wearing dark clothing and carrying sophisticated equipment. Some headed toward the royal quarters. Others moved toward the administrative wing where important documents and communications equipment were housed. A third group made their way toward the main entrances, clearly intending to control access to the palace grounds. The most chilling sight was Morrison himself, leading a team directly toward the royal family's private wing. He carried what appeared to be detailed floor plans and moved with the casual familiarity of someone who had walked these corridors thousands of times in his legitimate role as assistant head of security. Marcus activated his radio again, transmitting on the emergency frequency that would reach all loyal guards simultaneously. Code red. Hostile force inside palace. Royal family under direct threat. All units respond immediately. The response was swift but confused. Voices crackled over the radio as guards throughout the palace reported seeing unfamiliar personnel in restricted areas. But several voices were notably absent, guards who should have been at their posts but weren't responding to calls. Marcus realized that the conspiracy was even larger than they had estimated, with criminal sympathizers positioned throughout the security structure. From his hiding place in the foundation level, Marcus could hear the sounds of conflict beginning above. Shouting voices, running footsteps, and the occasional crash of furniture being overturned. The palace's peaceful night routine was being shattered by something it was never designed to handle, an attack from within by people who knew all its secrets. Marcus's radio crackled with an urgent transmission from Reynolds. Captain Thornfield, report your position immediately. We have multiple security breaches and need all available personnel. Chief, I'm observing hostile command center in foundation level. At least 20 armed individuals have deployed throughout palace. Morrison is leading assault on royal quarters. The silence that followed his transmission lasted several seconds. When Reynolds finally responded, his voice was tight with controlled fury. Morrison, are you certain? Confirmed, sir. He's been coordinating the entire operation from underground facility. This is not random break-in. It's organized assault using inside knowledge of palace security. Understood. MI5 units are en route, but they're still 15 minutes away. We need to protect the royal family until help arrives. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. Sir, I'm going to attempt to disable the criminal command center. If I can disrupt their communications and coordination, it might give our people a chance. Captain, that's suicide. You're outnumbered 20-1 down there. With respect, sir, the royal family is counting on us. I've seen their operation. They have explosive charges wired throughout this facility. If I can trigger those charges while they're deployed upstairs, it might stop them. Marcus didn't wait for Reynolds to respond. He switched off his radio and began moving toward the central area of the underground chamber where Morrison's teams had left their communication equipment and coordination materials. The space was guarded by only 2 men, both focused on monitoring radio transmissions from the teams attacking the palace above. Using skills learned in military special operations training, Marcus approached the guards from behind, moving with silent precision across the stone floor. The first guard never heard him coming. Marcus disabled him with a chokehold that left him unconscious but alive. The second guard turned at the sound of his colleague hitting the floor, but Marcus was already in motion, striking with controlled force that neutralized the threat without causing permanent harm. At the communication station, Marcus found a treasure trove of information about the criminal operation. Radio frequencies allowed him to monitor the progress of the assault teams. Detailed plans showed their objectives went far beyond simple theft. They intended to take the royal family hostage and use them as leverage for safe passage out of the country. Most disturbing of all, Marcus discovered that this attack was just one part of a larger operation targeting royal families and government officials across Europe. Marcus quickly photographed the documents before turning his attention to the explosive charges positioned throughout the chamber. Smith had been right. The criminals had wired the entire facility for demolition, with enough explosive power to bring down significant portions of the palace foundation. But the detonation system was more sophisticated than Marcus had expected, requiring multiple authorization codes to prevent accidental triggering. As he studied the explosive control panel, Marcus heard footsteps approaching from the tunnel entrance. Someone was returning to the command center, probably to report on the progress of the assault teams. Marcus grabbed one of the unconscious guard's weapons and positioned himself behind a stack of crates, preparing for what might be his final confrontation. The man who entered the chamber was someone Marcus recognized but had never suspected, Dr. William Hartwell, the royal family's personal physician. He had been treating the king and queen for over a decade. with unlimited access to their private quarters and complete trust from everyone in the palace. His betrayal was perhaps even more shocking than Morrison's. "Control, this is Hartwell." The doctor spoke into a radio as he approached the communication station. "Phase 1 complete. Subjects are secured and ready for transport. Estimated departure time, 20 minutes. Marcus felt his heart stop. If Hartwell was reporting that the royal family had been captured, then the assault had succeeded far more quickly than anyone had anticipated. The criminals now held the ultimate leverage, and MI5's approaching response teams might arrive too late to prevent a catastrophe. But as Hartwell reached the communication station and discovered the unconscious guards, Marcus realized he still had one advantage. The doctor was alone, focused on his radio communication, and unaware that anyone was observing him. Marcus emerged from concealment with his weapon raised. "Dr. Hartwell, step away from the radio and put your hands where I can see them." Hartwell spun around, his face showing genuine surprise for the first time Marcus had ever seen. The mild-mannered physician who had always seemed devoted to the royal family's health now revealed himself as a cold-eyed criminal who had been planning their destruction for years. "Captain Thornfield, I had wondered who was responsible for disrupting our timeline. You've caused us considerable inconvenience, but ultimately it changes nothing. The operation is essentially complete. What have you done with the royal family?" Hartwell smiled with disturbing calm. "They're safe for now, sedated and prepared for transport to a secure location where they'll remain until certain international agreements are finalized. Think of it as protective custody during a period of political transition." Marcus kept his weapon trained on the doctor while trying to process the implications of what he was hearing. "Political transition? You're talking about overthrowing the government. Governments rise and fall, Captain. Monarchies become obsolete. What we're facilitating is simply the natural evolution of political power structures. Our clients have invested considerable resources in ensuring that evolution proceeds smoothly." "Your clients?" "International interests who believe the current system of European monarchies represents an obstacle to global economic efficiency. The royal families will be treated humanely, but they will no longer be permitted to interfere with necessary changes." Marcus realized he was listening to something far more sinister than a simple criminal conspiracy. This was a coordinated attack on the very foundations of democratic government, disguised as a modernization effort, but actually designed to eliminate traditional checks on authoritarian power. "It won't work," Marcus said. "The people won't accept it. Military and police forces will respond. You can't just kidnap royal families and expect to reshape Europe." Hartwell's smile widened. "You underestimate the scope of our preparation, Captain. Similar operations are taking place simultaneously in 6 other countries tonight. By morning, the old order will have been swept away and replaced by something much more efficient. The people will be presented with a fait accompli and offered economic incentives to accept the new reality." The doctor's radio crackled with an incoming transmission. "Control, this is Morrison. Package secured and ready for transport. Departure in 10 minutes. Marcus felt time running out. If the royal family was moved from the palace to some unknown location, the chances of recovering them alive would diminish drastically. He had to act now, regardless of the personal consequences. "Dr. Hartwell, you're going to contact Morrison and tell him the operation is compromised. You're going to order him to release the royal family and surrender to authorities." "I'm afraid that's not possible, Captain. Even if I were willing to cooperate, which I'm not, the operation has proceeded beyond the point where individual participants can alter its trajectory. Morrison's team will depart according to schedule, with or without communication from this facility." Marcus realized that conventional negotiation wasn't going to work. Hartwell was a true believer in whatever cause had motivated this conspiracy, willing to sacrifice everything for what he saw as a greater good. But Marcus still had one option that might disrupt the criminal's plans, even if it cost him his own life. The explosive charges positioned throughout the chamber were designed to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. But if Marcus could detonate them while Morrison's teams were still in the palace, the resulting collapse might trap the criminals and give loyal security forces a chance to rescue the royal family. "Doctor, I'm going to give you one last chance to cooperate. Contact Morrison and order him to release his hostages. Hartwell studied Marcus with the detached interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "Captain, you're an admirable man, but you're fighting for a system that's already dead. The world has moved beyond the need for hereditary privilege and traditional authority structures. What we're implementing tonight is simply recognition of reality." Marcus moved toward the explosive control panel while keeping his weapon trained on Hartwell. "Maybe you're right about the world changing, Doctor. But some things are worth fighting for, even if the fight is hopeless. Captain, if you detonate those charges, you'll bring down half the palace. Innocent people will die, possibly including members of the royal family you're trying to save. Maybe, but it will also stop you from taking them to whatever hell you've planned for them. Sometimes the choice isn't between good and bad, it's between bad and worse." Marcus reached the control panel and began entering the authorization codes he had observed while studying the system. The process required 3 separate code sequences, each more complex than the last. Hartwell watched with growing alarm as Marcus worked through the first sequence. "Captain, you don't understand the full implications of what you're doing. This operation is just one part of a global restructuring that will benefit billions of people. The royal families are symbols of an outdated system that prevents efficient resource allocation and social progress. Funny thing about symbols, Doctor. Sometimes they're worth dying for." Marcus completed the second authorization sequence and began entering the final codes. Hartwell lunged forward, trying to stop him, but Marcus was ready for the attack. They grappled briefly beside the control panel before Marcus subdued the doctor with a blow that left him unconscious but breathing. As Marcus entered the final authorization codes, his radio crackled back to life with urgent transmissions from throughout the palace. "All units, MI5 tactical teams have arrived and are engaging hostile forces. Royal family location unknown. Repeat, royal family location unknown." Marcus paused with his finger over the final detonation switch. If MI5 forces were already in the palace, there might be a chance to rescue the royal family without bringing down the building. But there was also a chance that the criminals would escape with their hostages, disappearing into an international network that had been planning this operation for years. The radio crackled again with Morrison's voice. "All teams, execute emergency extraction protocol. Proceed to secondary exit points immediately." Marcus realized that the criminals were already adapting to the changed situation, implementing contingency plans that would allow them to escape even if their primary operation was compromised. In minutes, they would disappear with the royal family, and the chance to stop them would be lost forever. He pressed the detonation switch. The explosion that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The stone chamber around him seemed to flex and buckle as thousands of pounds of explosive force ripped through the foundation level. The ancient walls that had stood for centuries cracked and crumbled, sending massive blocks of stone crashing down into the space where the criminal command center had operated. Marcus found himself thrown against the wall by the blast, his ears ringing and his vision blurred by dust and debris. But he was alive, and more importantly, he could hear sounds of activity from the palace above. The explosion had definitely disrupted the criminals' plans, but he didn't yet know whether it had been enough to save the royal family. As he struggled to his feet and began making his way toward the tunnel exit, Marcus heard new sounds echoing through the damaged foundation. The distinctive voice of Chief Inspector Reynolds coordinating search and rescue operations, the crisp commands of MI5 tactical units securing the palace, and, most importantly, the voice of the king himself, apparently unharmed and demanding to know what had happened to his palace. The attack had been stopped, but Marcus knew that the larger conspiracy was still out there. Tonight's operation had been just one battle in a war that would probably continue for years. The forces seeking to overthrow the traditional order hadn't been defeated. They had just been forced to retreat and regroup. As Marcus climbed toward the surface, leaving behind the destroyed remnants of the criminal command center, he reflected on how much had changed since he first discovered the secret vault just days earlier. The palace would never be the same. The royal family would never again enjoy the innocent confidence that they were completely safe within their own walls. And Marcus himself would never again be able to view his duties as simple routine protection of friendly people. The world had revealed itself to be a much more dangerous place than he had imagined. But it had also revealed itself to be worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. As he emerged into the pre-dawn darkness of the palace grounds, surrounded by the controlled chaos of law enforcement response, Marcus knew that his real education in royal protection was just beginning. The immediate battle was won, but the war for the future of democratic government was far from over. The morning brought chaos disguised as routine. Marcus arrived at the palace at his usual time, but everything felt different now that he knew he was walking into what amounted to a war zone. The criminals might already know their operation had been discovered, and every face he passed could belong to an enemy. Director Hamilton's promise of undercover protection materialized quickly. New temporary staff members appeared throughout the palace. A cleaning woman here, a maintenance worker there, a kitchen assistant who seemed to know exactly where everything belonged despite supposedly being new. Marcus spotted at least 6 MI5 operatives during his morning patrol, though he was careful not to acknowledge them directly. The first sign of trouble came at 10:30. Dave Pritchard contacted Marcus over the radio with urgent news. "Captain, we've got a situation. The Foundation-level security systems went completely offline at 3 this morning. Backup power, motion sensors, cameras, everything dark for about 20 minutes. Then, back online like nothing happened." Marcus felt ice in his veins. 20 minutes is long enough to move a lot of merchandise. That's what I'm thinking. And here's the really weird part. The system logs show everything functioning normally. No record of any outage at all. Someone with serious technical skills covered their tracks. This meant the criminals were accelerating their operations, possibly preparing to abandon the facility or eliminate evidence. Marcus immediately called Reynolds, who arranged an emergency meeting with the MI5 team for that afternoon. But first, they needed to assess what had changed in the underground vault. At noon, during the shift change when security attention was focused on routine handovers, Marcus made his way back to the Foundation access point. This time, he wasn't alone. One of Hamilton's specialists, the man introduced as Smith, accompanied him. Smith was a former SAS operative who moved with the silent grace of a predator and carried enough concealed weapons to outfit a small army. The descent into the tunnels felt even more ominous than before. Smith used military hand signals to communicate as they approached the main chamber, checking for signs of surveillance or booby traps. When they reached the entrance, what they found made Marcus's worst fears seem optimistic. The underground vault was in the process of being systematically emptied. Half the artifacts were gone, leaving behind only empty crates and packing materials. The office area had been stripped of computers and files, with only a few scattered papers remaining as evidence of what had been there. Most disturbing of all, the criminals had left behind something new, a sophisticated surveillance system that had definitely not been there 2 days earlier. Smith examined the cameras with professional interest while Marcus documented the changes with his digital camera. "Military-grade equipment," Smith whispered. "Motion sensors, thermal imaging, facial recognition. They've turned this place into a fortress. Does that mean they know we've been here?" "Oh, they know. Question is whether they're preparing to fight or flee." Smith pointed to small devices attached to the chamber walls. "Those are shaped charges. Enough explosive to bring down the ceiling and bury everything under tons of rubble. This whole operation is wired to self-destruct." Marcus felt his blood turn cold. How long would it take them to detonate? These are remotely controlled. Could happen any second, or they might be waiting for something specific. Either way, we need to get out of here now. They retreated quickly through the tunnels, but Marcus's mind was racing with implications. If the criminals were prepared to destroy the facility, it meant they considered their operation fatally compromised. They would be making contingency plans, which almost certainly included eliminating witnesses. Back in the palace proper, Marcus tried to maintain his normal routine while watching for signs of escalating danger. During the afternoon briefing, he noticed that several staff members were absent without explanation. The head butler mentioned that 3 cleaning staff had called in sick simultaneously. A maintenance supervisor had failed to report for duty. Even one of the kitchen workers had disappeared. Reynolds shared Marcus's concerns when they met privately after the briefing. Too many absences to be coincidental. Either they're running scared, or they're positioning themselves for some kind of operation. The emergency meeting with Hamilton's team took place in a safe house across London, far from any possible palace surveillance. When Marcus and Reynolds arrived, they found Hamilton studying satellite photographs and technical diagrams with grim concentration. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," she announced without preamble. "Our surveillance teams detected multiple vehicles leaving the palace grounds last night during the security blackout. Heavy trucks, diplomatic vehicles with immunity plates, even an ambulance. They moved a substantial amount of material." Smith, still wearing his maintenance worker disguise, added his report from the underground investigation. "The facility is wired for demolition and under constant surveillance. They've also installed what appears to be a chemical dispersal system. If they decide to eliminate evidence, they can flood the tunnels with poison gas before detonating the explosives." Marcus felt sick. "What about the royal family? Are they in immediate danger?" "We have to assume yes," Hamilton replied. "Our intelligence suggests the criminals are preparing for what they call final phase protocols. That could mean anything from complete evacuation to eliminating all potential witnesses." Jones, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "We've identified several palace employees with connections to international crime syndicates. The head of maintenance has been receiving payments from a known money laundering operation. 2 senior staff members have made unexplained trips to countries known for artifact smuggling. And the assistant head of security has been accessing classified files far beyond his authorization level." Reynolds looked shocked. "David Morrison? I've known him for 8 years. He's one of my most trusted people." "That's what made him valuable to the criminals," Hamilton said. "Someone above suspicion with access to everything they needed. We believe he's been the inside coordinator for the entire operation." The revelation that Morrison was compromised sent shockwaves through everyone present. If the assistant head of security was working for the criminals, then the conspiracy reached into the very heart of palace protection. Morrison had access to all security protocols, guard schedules, and emergency procedures. He could have been feeding information to the criminals for years. "We need to arrest him immediately," Reynolds said. "Not yet," Hamilton cautioned. "Morrison doesn't know we've identified him. If we move too quickly, he might trigger their contingency plans before we're ready to respond. We need to let him think he's still undetected while we prepare for whatever they're planning." Marcus struggled with the implications. "So we just wait while they prepare to attack the royal family?" "We prepare our own countermeasures. Starting tonight, the royal family will have doubled security disguised as routine adjustments. We'll also be monitoring all communications from the palace and tracking movements of suspected conspirators." The meeting broke up with assignments for everyone involved. Marcus and Reynolds would return to their normal duties while secretly identifying other potential conspirators. Hamilton's team would maintain surveillance and prepare tactical response units. Most critically, they would try to determine exactly what the criminals were planning for their final phase. The drive back to the palace felt like heading into battle. Marcus knew that the next few hours might determine not only his own survival, but the fate of the monarchy itself. The criminals had years of preparation and inside knowledge on their side. But they also had something working against them: the loyalty and determination of people who would never accept the corruption of something they held sacred. That evening, the palace settled into what appeared to be normal routine. The royal family dined privately, attended to correspondence, and prepared for bed. Staff members went about their duties with practiced efficiency. Guards maintained their posts and patrols. To any outside observer, it was just another quiet night at the royal residence. But Marcus could see the subtle signs of increased tension. Security guards positioned differently than usual. Staff members who stayed longer than their shifts normally required. Maintenance workers doing emergency repairs that seemed to involve a lot of electronic equipment. Hamilton's people were in position, but Marcus worried it might not be enough. At 11:30, as Marcus was completing his final patrol of the evening, his radio crackled with a coded message from Reynolds. "All units, be advised of planned maintenance in the foundation level tonight. Normal security protocols apply." The message seemed routine, but Marcus recognized it as a warning. Something was happening in the underground facility, and Reynolds was alerting loyal security personnel without revealing the true nature of the threat. Marcus made his way to a predetermined observation point overlooking the Foundation access area. From his concealed position, he could monitor the entrance without being detected. What he saw over the next hour convinced him that the endgame was beginning. Starting at midnight, a steady stream of people entered the Foundation level. Some were palace employees he recognized, but others were clearly outsiders, men and women with the hard faces and practiced movements of professional criminals. They carried equipment bags and communication gear, preparing for what looked like a major operation. At 12:45, Morrison himself appeared. The assistant head of security moved with the confidence of someone who owned the place, directing the positioning of people and equipment with military precision. Marcus watched through binoculars as Morrison consulted what appeared to be detailed blueprints of the palace, pointing out specific locations to his collaborators. Marcus counted at least 15 people entering the Foundation level over the course of an hour. Combined with any criminals already positioned throughout the palace, it represented a substantial assault force. Whatever they were planning, it was going to happen soon. His radio remained quiet, which meant other security guards were either unaware of the situation or were part of the conspiracy. Marcus realized he might be the only loyal guard who knew what was happening. The thought was terrifying, but it also clarified his responsibility. He had to warn the royal family and coordinate with Hamilton's team before the criminals could execute their plan. Moving carefully to avoid detection, Marcus made his way to a secure communication point and contacted Hamilton's emergency number. The conversation was brief and conducted in predetermined code phrases, but the message was clear: the assault was beginning. Package delivery commencing, Marcus reported. Multiple contractors on site. Immediate intervention required. Understood. Cleanup crew en route. Maintain position and observe. Hamilton's response told Marcus that MI5 tactical teams were mobilizing, but it would take time for them to reach the palace and assess the situation. In the meantime, Marcus was essentially alone against a well-organized criminal force that had been planning this operation for years. As he watched the Foundation entrance, Marcus saw Morrison emerge briefly to speak with someone via radio. The assistant head of security looked satisfied, as if receiving confirmation that everything was proceeding according to plan. Then, he returned underground, leaving only a single lookout posted at the entrance. Marcus realized this was his chance to gather more intelligence about what the criminals were planning. If he could get close enough to the underground facility without being detected, he might be able to determine their objectives and timeline. The information could be crucial for the response teams that were racing toward the palace. Using skills learned in years of military and security training, Marcus approached the Foundation access point from an unexpected direction. The lookout was positioned to watch the main corridors, but there were service passages that could provide alternative access to the underground area. The maintenance tunnel he chose was narrow and uncomfortable, but it led directly to the Foundation level without passing through any monitored choke points. Marcus crawled through the confined space for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, driven by the knowledge that the royal family's lives might depend on the intelligence he could gather. When he finally reached an observation point overlooking the main chamber, what Marcus saw made his blood run cold. The criminals had transformed the underground facility into a military command center. Communication equipment, weapons, and tactical gear were distributed throughout the space. Most shocking of all, they had constructed detailed scale models of the palace's upper floors, complete with guard positions and escape routes. This wasn't just a heist or smuggling operation. It was a full-scale assault on the monarchy itself. Morrison stood at the center of it all, coordinating activities with the calm confidence of a general directing a battle. He consulted his watch frequently, as if working toward a specific deadline. Around him, teams of criminals made final preparations for whatever they planned to unleash. Marcus activated his radio's emergency frequency and transmitted a brief, coded message: "Crown jewels in immediate danger. Full assault imminent. All units respond." The message would alert every loyal security guard in the palace and trigger emergency protocols that would bring police and military units racing to the scene. But Marcus knew it might already be too late. The criminals had years to plan this operation, while the defenders had only hours to respond. As he watched Morrison check his watch one more time and nod to his teams, Marcus realized the attack was about to begin. In minutes, perhaps seconds, the criminals would emerge from their underground fortress and strike at the very heart of the British monarchy. The battle for the palace was no longer coming. It had arrived. Marcus barely slept that night. Every sound in his small apartment made him jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. He had returned from his underground discovery 6 hours ago, but his mind still reeled from the implications of what he had found. The stolen treasures, the compromised security files, the photographs of his colleagues, and their families. It all pointed to a conspiracy that reached deep into the heart of the palace. By 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and began preparing for what might be the most dangerous day of his career. Over coffee and toast, he reviewed the photographs he had taken with his digital camera, trying to identify patterns and connections he might have missed the night before. The artifacts came from dozens of countries and cultures, suggesting a global network of theft and trafficking. One detail troubled him more than the others. Several of the shipping labels he had seen bore recent dates, some within the last month. This wasn't just a storage facility for old crimes. It was an active operation, moving stolen goods in and out of the palace on a regular basis. That meant whoever was running it would be monitoring the vault carefully, checking for any signs of discovery. Marcus deleted the photos from his camera's memory, but kept copies on a secure USB drive hidden in his apartment. If something happened to him, he wanted evidence to survive. He also wrote a detailed report of his findings and sealed it in an envelope addressed to Detective Chief Inspector Sarah Carmichael at Scotland Yard, someone outside the palace security structure who couldn't be compromised by inside connections. The morning shift change at the palace was routine, at least on the surface. Marcus exchanged pleasantries with the night guards, received the overnight report, and began his normal patrol route. But now he saw everything differently. Every staff member could be a suspect. Every security camera could be monitored by hostile eyes. Every conversation could be reported back to the criminals using the palace as their base. As he walked through the East Wing, Marcus noticed things he had overlooked before. A cleaning cart positioned near the foundation access point. A maintenance worker he didn't recognize examining the security panel that had malfunctioned yesterday. Small details that might mean nothing, or might be signs that the criminals were reacting to his discovery. His radio crackled with a message from the Central Security Office. Captain Thornfield, please report to Chief Inspector Reynolds' office immediately. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Reynolds was supposed to be at a conference in Brussels for 2 more days. If he had returned early and was calling Marcus to his office, it could only mean one thing. Someone knew about the underground investigation. The walk to Reynolds' office felt like a death march. Marcus tried to keep his expression neutral as he passed other guards and staff members, but his mind was racing with possibilities. Had someone seen him enter the foundation level? Had the criminals monitoring the vault detected his presence? Had Dave reported his requests for access codes? The chief inspector's office was located in the administrative wing of the palace, a no-nonsense space designed for serious security business. Reynolds was a 20-year veteran of the Royal Protection Service, known for his thoroughness and absolute loyalty to the crown. He was also, Marcus realized with growing dread, one of the few people with access to all the security codes and classified information that had been compromised. Marcus knocked on the heavy oak door and waited for permission to enter. When it came, he stepped inside to find Reynolds sitting behind his desk, studying a thick file folder. The chief inspector looked up with tired eyes and gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Marcus. We need to talk." As Marcus settled into the chair, he tried to read Reynolds' expression for clues about what was coming. The older man's face was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. On his desk, Marcus could see the file folder was marked confidential, but couldn't make out any other details. "I received an interesting report this morning," Reynolds began, his voice carefully measured, "about security malfunctions in the foundation level and unauthorized access to restricted areas." Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but forced himself to remain calm. "Sir, I can explain. There were system malfunctions affecting the royal quarters security panels. I traced the source to possible interference from the foundation level and conducted a preliminary investigation." Reynolds nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm aware of the technical issues. Dave Pritchard briefed me when I returned early from Brussels. But what concerns me, Captain, is that you accessed classified areas without proper authorization and failed to follow standard protocols for restricted zone investigations. Sir, with respect, there was no senior officer available to authorize the investigation. The assistant chief is on medical leave, and you were scheduled to be away for 2 more days. The royal family returns this evening, and I felt the security concerns needed immediate attention. I see. Reynolds opened the file folder and removed a sheet of paper. This is a personnel report I received about you 6 months ago, Marcus. It notes your exemplary service record, but also mentions some concerns about your tendency to act independently rather than following chain of command. Marcus tried to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced. Was Reynolds testing him? Threatening him? Or was this conversation exactly what it appeared to be, a disciplinary meeting about protocol violations? I take full responsibility for my actions, sir. I was trying to ensure palace security wasn't compromised. Reynolds studied him for a long moment, then closed the file folder. Tell me exactly what you found down there, Captain. Every detail. This was the moment of truth. Marcus had to decide whether to trust Reynolds with what he had discovered, or to continue his investigation alone. The problem was that Reynolds had access to all the security information that had been compromised. He could be completely innocent, or he could be the inside man enabling the entire operation. Marcus made his choice. Sir, I found evidence of what appears to be a major security breach. There's an active facility in the foundation level that's being used for illegal purposes. I believe we may have a serious criminal operation using palace infrastructure. Reynolds leaned forward, his expression sharpening. What kind of illegal activity? Storage and trafficking of what appear to be stolen cultural artifacts. Hundreds of items, worth millions of dollars. There's also evidence that palace security information has been compromised, including guard schedules and personal information about staff members. For a moment, Reynolds said nothing. He stared at Marcus with an unreadable expression, and the silence stretched uncomfortably long. Marcus began to wonder if he had just signed his own death warrant by trusting the wrong person. Finally, Reynolds spoke. Show me. Sir, take me down there, Captain. Show me exactly what you found. Marcus felt a mix of relief and continued apprehension. Reynolds' reaction seemed genuinely surprised rather than defensive, which suggested he might not be involved in the conspiracy. But it could also be an act designed to assess how much Marcus really knew. Yes, sir. But I should mention that the facility appears to be actively monitored. Our presence might be detected. That's a risk we'll have to take. If what you're telling me is accurate, we're dealing with a threat to national security that goes far beyond normal palace security concerns. They made their way to the Foundation access point, moving carefully to avoid attracting attention from other staff members. Marcus used his access codes to open the heavy steel door, and they descended the stone staircase into the tunnels. Reynolds carried a powerful flashlight and a digital camera, prepared to document whatever they found. The walk through the tunnel seemed longer than it had the night before. Every sound echoed ominously off the stone walls, and Marcus found himself constantly looking over his shoulder for signs of pursuit. When they reached the entrance to the underground chamber, Reynolds stopped dead in his tracks, exactly as Marcus had done. Good God, the chief inspector whispered. How long has this been here? Based on the documents I saw, it could be decades. The operation appears to have been running under multiple administrations. They spent the next hour systematically documenting everything in the chamber. Reynolds took hundreds of photographs, while Marcus provided running commentary about what he had discovered the night before. The chief inspector's reactions seemed genuine: shock, anger, and growing determination to get to the bottom of the conspiracy. When they reached the office area in the corner of the chamber, Reynolds became very quiet. He studied the computer screen and the documents on the desk with the intensity of a man seeing his worst fears confirmed. Marcus, he said finally, this is worse than we thought. Look at this shipping schedule. On the computer screen was a detailed timeline showing artifact movements over the next 2 weeks. But it wasn't just about moving stolen goods. It was about using royal events as cover for their operations. State dinners, diplomatic receptions, and public ceremonies were all listed with notes about delivery windows and security gaps. They're timing their operations around official palace events, Marcus realized. When security is focused on protecting the royal family during public appearances, they move their merchandise through the tunnels. Reynolds nodded grimly. And look at this list of upcoming acquisitions. The Jerusalem collection you mentioned, yes, but also items from the British Museum, the Louvre, and private collections around the world. This isn't just theft, it's cultural terrorism on a massive scale. They continued their investigation, finding more evidence of the operation's scope and sophistication. Hidden cameras monitored the tunnel entrances. Motion sensors were positioned throughout the chamber. Communication equipment allowed real-time coordination with outside contacts. The criminals had built a high-tech command center beneath one of the most secure buildings in the world. In one of the filing cabinets, Reynolds found a document that made his face go white. It was a detailed plan for what was called Operation Crown Jewel, a scheme to steal selected items from the royal collection during the upcoming state visit by the President of France. The plan included guard schedules, security protocols, and evacuation routes that could only have come from someone with the highest level of palace access. "We need to get out of here," Reynolds said urgently. "This facility is too sophisticated not to have detected our presence by now. They'll be sending people to investigate." As they hurried back through the tunnels toward the surface, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that Reynolds appeared to be trustworthy and was taking the threat seriously. Terror at the realization that they were now both in mortal danger from people who had been operating successfully for years and would stop at nothing to protect their empire. They emerged from the foundation level and locked the access door behind them. But Marcus knew their investigation had not gone unnoticed. Somewhere in the criminal network, alarms were already being raised. The countdown to confrontation had begun. Back in Reynolds' office, they spread out the photographs and documents they had gathered, trying to piece together the full scope of the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming, but it also raised disturbing questions about how such an operation could have existed for so long without detection. "Someone in the palace administration has to be involved," Reynolds said grimly. "The level of access required for this operation goes beyond what any security guard or staff member could provide. We're talking about someone with authority over security protocols, building maintenance, and administrative functions." Marcus had been thinking the same thing. "Sir, what's our next move? Do we contact Scotland Yard? MI5? The press?" Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photographs spread across his desk. "The problem is that we don't know how high this goes. If we contact law enforcement through normal channels, word might get back to the conspirators before any arrests can be made. They could destroy evidence, eliminate witnesses, disappear completely. Then, what do you suggest? We need help from outside the normal chain of command. Someone with the authority to act independently and the resources to move quickly." Reynolds picked up his secure phone and dialed a number from memory. "I'm calling Director Hamilton at MI5. She owes me a favor from the embassy bombing case 5 years ago." While Reynolds made his call, Marcus continued studying the photographs, trying to memorize every detail that might be important later. The conversation was brief and conducted in code words that revealed nothing about the actual situation. When Reynolds hung up, he looked both determined and worried. "Hamilton will meet us tonight at a safe location. She's bringing a specialist team that can handle this kind of investigation without alerting the regular bureaucracy. Until then, we maintain normal operations and try to avoid arousing any suspicion." The rest of the day was agony for Marcus. He conducted his regular patrols, filed his normal reports, and interacted with other staff members as if nothing had changed. But every conversation felt loaded with hidden meaning. Every person could be a conspirator. Every routine interaction could be his last. The royal family returned that evening as scheduled, arriving by helicopter on the palace grounds. Marcus was part of the security detail that escorted them from the landing pad to their private quarters. As he watched the king and queen walk up the grand staircase, chatting and laughing with their children, he felt a crushing weight of responsibility. These people trusted him to keep them safe. They went to sleep each night believing they were protected by loyal guards and secure walls. They had no idea that beneath their feet lay a criminal empire that threatened everything they represented. After the royal family was settled and the evening security briefing was complete, Marcus met Reynolds at the predetermined location, a small pub in a quiet neighborhood 20 minutes from the palace. Director Hamilton was already there, sitting in a corner booth with two other individuals who looked like they could handle themselves in a crisis. Hamilton was a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had built her reputation on handling sensitive cases that required discretion and decisive action. The two men with her were introduced only as Smith and Jones, which Marcus assumed were not their real names. Over the next 2 hours, Marcus and Reynolds presented their evidence to the MI5 team. Hamilton asked penetrating questions and took detailed notes, while Smith and Jones reviewed the photographs and documents with professional interest. By the time they finished, everyone around the table understood the magnitude of what they were facing. This operation has been running for at least 15 years, Hamilton concluded. Possibly longer. The sophistication level and international connections suggest involvement by organized crime syndicates, possibly with state sponsorship from hostile foreign governments. What's our next move? Reynolds asked. Hamilton consulted her notes. We need more intelligence before we can move. I'm going to put surveillance teams on the tunnel entrances and monitor communications from the underground facility. I also need you two to continue your normal duties while gathering additional evidence about inside collaborators. Marcus felt his heart sink. You want us to go back down there? Not immediately, but we need to identify everyone involved before we make arrests. One missed conspirator could warn the others and bring the whole investigation crashing down. Hamilton's expression was grim. I won't lie to you, gentlemen. You're both in considerable danger. These people have been successful for years, and they won't hesitate to eliminate threats to their operation. What about the royal family? Marcus asked. They're at risk as long as this operation continues. Agreed. Starting tomorrow, we'll have undercover agents positioned throughout the palace, disguised as temporary staff members. The royal family will have additional protection without knowing it. As they prepared to leave the pub, Hamilton pulled Marcus aside. Captain Thornfield, I want you to know that what you've uncovered here could save lives and preserve priceless cultural heritage from around the world. But I also want you to understand that the next few days could be the most dangerous of your life. Are you prepared for that? Marcus thought about the royal family sleeping peacefully in their beds, trusting him to keep them safe. He thought about the stolen artifacts representing thousands of years of human history being trafficked like common merchandise. He thought about the criminals who had turned the palace itself into their weapon against everything he had sworn to protect. Yes, ma'am. I'm ready. Hamilton nodded approvingly. Good. Because tomorrow, we begin taking back the palace. As Marcus drove back to his apartment through the quiet London streets, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just 2 days. He had gone from a simple palace guard to a key player in what could be the most significant security investigation in royal history. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error was non-existent. But, for the first time since discovering the underground vault, Marcus felt hope. He was no longer alone in his knowledge, and resources were being marshaled to confront the conspiracy. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but also the beginning of justice. The criminals had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the loyalty and determination of a simple guard who loved his country and the people he had sworn to protect. Now they would pay the price for that arrogance. The battle for the palace was about to begin. Captain Marcus Thornfield had walked the same marble corridors of Whitmore Palace for 12 years. Every morning at 6 sharp, he began his patrol route through the East Wing. The ornate paintings of long-dead kings watched him pass, their golden frames catching the early sunlight that streamed through tall windows. Today felt different, though he couldn't explain why. The palace had been his world since he was 23 years old. Fresh out of military academy, eager to serve crown and country, he had thought himself lucky to be selected for the Royal Guard. Now, at 35, he understood the weight of responsibility that came with protecting the royal family. Every door he checked, every shadow he investigated, every sound he heard in the night could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. Marcus paused at the intersection where the East Wing met the central corridor. The morning staff hurried past him, carrying silver trays and fresh linens. They nodded respectfully as they went about their duties. He had learned their names over the years, their schedules, their habits. Mrs. Henderson from the kitchen always hummed while she worked. James, the young footman, still stumbled over his own feet when nervous. Sarah, the head housemaid, could spot dust from 20 paces away. The palace operated like a well-oiled machine, with every person playing their part in maintaining the illusion of royal perfection. But Marcus knew better than most that beneath the polished surface, secrets lurked in every corner. He had seen things over the years that never made it into official reports. Conversations that stopped when he entered a room. Documents hastily hidden when he approached. Late-night meetings in rooms that should have been empty. His radio crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. Captain Thornfield, this is Control. Report status on East Wing Patrol. Marcus pressed the button on his shoulder-mounted radio. East Wing secure. Beginning second floor inspection. The second floor housed the royal family's private quarters, along with guest rooms for visiting dignitaries. Security was tightest here, with motion sensors and cameras monitoring every inch of the corridors. Marcus had memorized the placement of every device, every blind spot, every emergency exit. His life might depend on that knowledge someday. As he climbed the grand staircase, his leather boots silent on the thick carpet, Marcus reflected on the changes he had witnessed in the palace over the years. 3 different prime ministers had come and gone. The old king had passed away, and his son now wore the crown. Wars had been fought and won. Economic crises had shaken the nation. Through it all, the palace had remained a constant, a symbol of stability in an uncertain world. But stability, Marcus had learned, was often an illusion. He turned left at the top of the stairs, heading toward the royal family's private wing. The hallway here was narrower than the grand corridors below, lined with family portraits and personal photographs. These images told a different story than the formal paintings in the public areas. Here were pictures of birthday parties, family vacations, candid moments of laughter and joy. Marcus had watched the young prince and princess grow up in these photographs, from toddlers to teenagers to young adults. The prince, now 28, had recently returned from his military service overseas. The princess, 25, was preparing for her upcoming wedding to a duke from a neighboring country. Both seemed genuinely kind, unlike some royals Marcus had encountered in his career. They treated the staff with respect, remembered names, asked about families. It made his job easier when he actually liked the people he was protecting. As he approached the entrance to the royal quarters, Marcus noticed something unusual. The security panel beside the door was blinking red instead of its normal steady green. He frowned and moved closer to investigate. The panel showed an error message he had never seen before. System malfunction. Contact technical support. Marcus made a mental note to report the issue after his patrol. Security systems in the royal quarters couldn't afford to malfunction, even briefly. He tried his access card on the backup reader, and it worked normally. The door clicked open, and he stepped into the royal family's private domain. The silence here was different from the rest of the palace. Thicker somehow, as if the very walls absorbed sound. Marcus could hear his own breathing as he moved through the sitting room, past expensive furniture covered in white sheets. The royal family was currently in residence at their country estate, leaving these rooms empty and eerily quiet. He checked each room methodically, looking for anything out of place. The king's study, lined with leather-bound books and hunting trophies. The queen's private parlor, decorated in soft pastels and filled with fresh flowers. The prince's room, still bearing traces of his military training in the perfectly made bed and organized desk. The princess's suite, elegant and feminine, with wedding planning materials scattered across a writing table. Everything appeared normal, but the malfunctioning security panel nagged at him. In 12 years of service, Marcus had never seen that particular error message. Palace security systems were maintained by the best technicians money could buy. Malfunctions were rare and usually fixed within hours. He decided to investigate further and made his way to the security office in the basement. The underground levels of the palace were a maze of service corridors, storage rooms, and technical facilities. Most of the palace staff never ventured down here, leaving it to the security team and maintenance crews. The security office was a high-tech nerve center, monitoring every inch of the palace grounds through hundreds of cameras and sensors. 3 technicians worked around the clock, watching screens and responding to alerts. Marcus found Dave Pritchard, the senior technician, hunched over a computer terminal with a concerned expression on his weathered face. "Dave, I've got a red light on the royal quarters panel. Error message about system malfunction." Dave looked up from his screen, his gray hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "That's the third one today, Captain. Started about 4 this morning. I've been trying to track down the source, but it's weird. The system shows everything working normally from here, but the local panels keep throwing errors." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In security work, weird usually meant bad. Any pattern to the malfunctions? "That's just it," Dave said, pulling up a schematic on his screen. "They're all in areas connected to the old foundation. East Wing, Royal Quarters, the chapel basement. But here's the thing. I can't find any actual problems with the hardware. It's like something is interfering with the signals." The old foundation. Marcus knew the palace had been built on the ruins of a medieval castle, with some sections dating back over 800 years. Most of the ancient structure had been demolished or built over, but parts of the original foundation remained, creating an underground network of tunnels and chambers that few people knew about. "Have you checked the foundation level?" Marcus asked. Dave shook his head. "That's beyond my clearance level, Captain. Those areas are restricted access only. I'd need authorization from the Chief of Security or higher." Marcus considered this. Chief Inspector Reynolds was currently attending a security conference in Brussels and wouldn't return for 3 days. The assistant chief was on medical leave following surgery. That left Marcus as the senior security official in the palace, at least temporarily. "I'll check it out myself," he decided. "Give me the access codes for the foundation level." Dave hesitated. "Captain, I'm not sure that's a good idea. Those tunnels haven't been used in years. Could be structural issues, bad air, anything. And the maps we have are from the 1940s. Half the passages might be blocked or collapsed by now." "I'll take proper precautions," Marcus assured him. "But if something down there is interfering with our security systems, I need to know about it." The royal family returns tomorrow evening. Reluctantly, Dave pulled up the access codes and printed out a copy of the foundation-level blueprints. The paper was yellowed with age, showing a complex network of tunnels, chambers, and staircases that seemed to extend under the entire palace complex. "Take radio contact every 15 minutes, Dave insisted. "And, for God's sake, don't go alone. Take at least one other guard with you." Marcus nodded, though he was already planning to investigate alone. Fewer people involved meant less chance of words spreading through the palace gossip network. If there was something down there that shouldn't be, he wanted to assess the situation himself before bringing in others. He returned to the main security office and selected a heavy-duty flashlight, a portable radio, and a digital camera. The foundation access point was located in the basement of the chapel wing, behind a heavy steel door marked with warnings about authorized personnel only. The key turned easily in the lock, as if the door had been opened recently. Marcus made note of this fact as he pulled the door open, revealing a narrow stone staircase that descended into darkness. The air that wafted up smelled of damp stone and something else, something metallic that he couldn't identify. He clicked on his flashlight and began his descent into the forgotten depths of the palace. The stairs were worn smooth by centuries of use, their edges rounded by countless footsteps. His light revealed stone walls covered in a thin layer of moisture, creating an almost mirror-like surface that reflected his beam back at him. At the bottom of the stairs, Marcus found himself in a circular chamber with 4 tunnels branching off in different directions. According to his map, the tunnel to his right led toward the east wing, where the security malfunctions had been occurring. He chose that direction and began walking, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls. The tunnel was taller than he had expected, easily 8 feet high and wide enough for 2 people to walk side by side. Someone had clearly maintained it over the years, as the floor was clean and the walls showed no signs of structural damage. Emergency lighting fixtures hung from the ceiling, though none were currently illuminated. As he walked deeper into the tunnel, Marcus noticed something that made him pause. Fresh scuff marks on the stone floor, as if heavy objects had been dragged through recently. He knelt down and examined them more closely with his flashlight. The marks were definitely recent, probably within the last few days. Someone had been using these tunnels. Marcus continued forward, following the tunnel as it curved to the left. According to his map, he should be directly under the east wing now, approximately 30 feet below the ground floor. The tunnel began to widen, and he could see light ahead, not electric light, but a faint glow that seemed to come from around the next corner. He turned off his flashlight and crept forward, using the wall to guide himself in the near darkness. As he rounded the corner, he stopped dead in his tracks, hardly believing what he saw. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, easily the size of a cathedral. But it was what filled the chamber that took his breath away. Rows upon rows of wooden crates, metal containers, and canvas-covered objects stretched into the shadows beyond his vision. The light he had seen came from a string of battery-powered LED fixtures that ran along the ceiling, casting an eerie glow over the entire scene. Marcus turned his flashlight back on and approached the nearest row of crates. They were made of heavy wood, reinforced with metal straps, and marked with symbols and numbers he didn't recognize. Some bore shipping labels in languages he couldn't read. Others had inventory tags with dates going back decades. He pried open the lid of one crate with his tactical knife and peered inside. Nestled in protective foam were dozens of small objects that gleamed gold in his flashlight beam. Marcus carefully lifted one out and examined it closely. It was a figurine, exquisitely crafted, depicting some kind of ancient deity. The weight and color suggested it was solid gold, and the craftsmanship indicated it was very old and probably priceless. His hands trembling slightly, Marcus replaced the figurine and moved to another crate. This one contained paintings, carefully wrapped in acid-free tissue paper. He unwrapped one enough to see a corner of the canvas and immediately recognized the style as Renaissance-era artwork. The signature in the corner made his blood run cold. He was looking at what appeared to be a lost masterpiece by a famous artist worth millions of dollars. Marcus stumbled backward, his mind reeling from the implications of what he had discovered. This wasn't just a storage room. It was a treasure vault containing what appeared to be stolen artifacts, artwork, and precious objects from around the world. And it was hidden directly beneath the palace, accessible to anyone with the right codes and knowledge of the tunnel system. He fumbled for his radio, then stopped. Protocol demanded that he report his findings immediately, but something held him back. If this vault existed with the knowledge of palace officials, reporting it through normal channels could put him in danger. If it existed without official knowledge, then someone had been using the palace as a cover for what appeared to be a massive theft and smuggling operation. Either way, Marcus realized he had stumbled onto something that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy itself. He began taking photographs with his digital camera, documenting everything he could see. The scope of the collection was staggering. Ancient Egyptian artifacts, Greek sculptures, Roman coins, medieval manuscripts, Renaissance paintings, Asian ceramics, African masks, South American gold work. It was like a private museum of stolen cultural treasures. As he worked his way deeper into the chamber, Marcus discovered that the collection was organized with military precision. Each section was labeled and cataloged, with detailed inventory lists posted on clipboards. Someone had spent considerable time and effort organizing this underground treasure trove. In one section, he found crates that had been opened recently, their contents partially removed. Packing materials and shipping labels lay scattered on the floor nearby. It appeared that items were regularly moved in and out of the vault, suggesting an active smuggling operation rather than just a storage facility. Marcus checked his watch and realized he had been underground for over an hour. Dave would be expecting his regular check-in soon, and he needed to decide how to handle this situation. The smart thing would be to leave immediately, document everything he had seen, and figure out his next move carefully. But as he turned to leave, his flashlight beam caught something that made him freeze. In the far corner of the chamber, partially hidden behind a stack of crates, was a modern office setup. Desk, computer, filing cabinets, and communication equipment. Someone was actively managing this operation from right beneath the palace. Marcus crept closer to investigate, his heart pounding so hard he was sure someone would hear it. The computer was on, its screen showing what appeared to be shipping schedules and inventory databases. File folders on the desk contained correspondence in multiple languages, with letterheads from auction houses, private collectors, and cultural institutions around the world. One letter, written in English, caught his attention. It was addressed to someone called the benefactor and discussed the upcoming acquisition of the Jerusalem collection, apparently a group of ancient religious artifacts that would be relocated to the facility within the next week. The letter was signed by someone using only the initial M and dated just 3 days ago. Marcus photographed everything he could reach without disturbing the setup, knowing that even the smallest change might be noticed by whoever used this underground office. As he worked, he tried to process the implications of what he was seeing. This wasn't just a simple theft ring. It was a sophisticated international operation that dealt in cultural artifacts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And it was operating directly beneath one of the most secure buildings in the country, with apparent access to royal security codes and palace infrastructure. His radio crackled to life, causing him to nearly drop his camera in surprise. "Captain Thornfield, this is Control. Please report your status." Marcus fumbled for the radio. "Control, this is Thornfield. I'm investigating the security malfunction in the foundation level. No immediate threats detected. Request another 30 minutes to complete inspection." "Understood, Captain. Report back in 30 minutes." Marcus knew he was pushing his luck, but he needed more evidence before he could decide how to proceed. He moved to the filing cabinets and carefully opened the top drawer. Inside were hundreds of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be authenticity certificates for various artifacts. Many of the certificates bore the seals of major museums and cultural institutions. One file folder was labeled Palace Security and contained detailed floor plans of the palace, including areas that Marcus knew were classified. Guard schedules, security protocols, camera locations, and even personal information about security staff members were all documented with frightening accuracy. Another folder contained photographs of the royal family at various public events, with notes about their movements, schedules, and security arrangements. Marcus felt sick as he realized that whoever was running this operation had been watching and documenting the royals for what appeared to be years. At the bottom of the filing cabinet, Marcus found a folder that made his blood run cold. It was labeled Insurance and contained detailed photographs of several palace security guards, including himself. Personal information, family details, home addresses, and daily routines were all documented. There were also photographs that had clearly been taken without the subject's knowledge, pictures of guards at home, with their families, going about their daily lives. The message was clear. Whoever was running this operation knew everything about the security staff and was prepared to use that information as leverage if necessary. Marcus carefully replaced everything exactly as he had found it and made his way back toward the tunnel entrance. As he walked through the rows of stolen treasures, he tried to make sense of what he had discovered. The scope and sophistication of the operation suggested it had been running for years, possibly decades. The access to palace security information indicated someone on the inside was involved, possibly at a very high level. But who? And how many people were involved? The documents he had seen suggested an international network, with contacts in multiple countries and connections to legitimate auction houses and collectors. This wasn't the work of a few rogue guards or staff members. It was a major criminal enterprise. As he reached the tunnel entrance, Marcus paused to consider his options. He could report his findings through official channels, but the evidence of compromised security suggested that might be dangerous. He could contact law enforcement directly, but without knowing how high the corruption went, that might also put him at risk. Or he could investigate further on his own, gathering more evidence before making any official reports. It was risky, but it might be the only way to ensure that everyone involved was caught and that the royal family was protected. Marcus made his decision. He would continue investigating privately while maintaining his normal duties. He would document everything carefully and build a case that couldn't be ignored or covered up. And he would be very, very careful about who he trusted. Because one thing was clear, the palace was not the secure sanctuary it appeared to be. Hidden beneath its foundations was a criminal empire that threatened everything the monarchy stood for. And Marcus Thornfield, career soldier and loyal guard, now found himself the only person standing between that empire and the royal family he had sworn to protect. As he climbed the stone stairs back to the basement level, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. He had uncovered a secret that powerful people would kill to protect. And, tomorrow, the royal family would return to a palace that was no longer safe. The game had begun, and Marcus wasn't even sure who the players were.